All right, Game Lab number 7 is about creating a little scene with what are called sprites, and this will be our first little dive into using sprites. So let's take a look. Today you're going to have to include at least 5 sprites in your little scene that you make, and if you use a sprite more than one time, that counts as part of the 5. There also has to be a context. I don't want just a random collection of sprites on the screen, and if you're thinking, well, I don't know what a sprite is, just you got to keep watching, you'll see. And so it can't just be a random collection of sprites on the screen. You got to come up with a plan. And I don't think you'll have too hard of a time doing that once you see the things you have available. I've got some tips here, but I'm not going to read those. And when you get all done, you're going to want to rename it and turn it in. So let's get straight over to code.org and go to work here. Now, first of all, let me show you this. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. That the background, actually I have 6 here, the background would count, but I have 2 spaceships up high. I have a little kind of a drone robot thing in the middle right here, and then I also have an astronaut and a robot on the surface that kind of looks like Mars or whatever. So, the whole thing today is getting into where do you get these, and once you have them, how do you work with them? And you see a whole bunch of commands over here on the right-hand side that are kind of new to us, at least in this class. And so that's what we're going to look at. How do you manipulate those? And of course, later on, you're going to be able to move those around and make them do things, and they'll be part of games that you design. And so that's where we're headed. All right, so let's get back here, and I'm going to click Game Lab, and let's start from scratch. I'm going to show you a few things here. You can take the draw loop off. We're still not using that, but the time is coming very soon. And we haven't talked about it, but this game area on code.org, the Game Lab, is kind of divided into 2 sections. There's a code side and there's an animation side. So there's a button up here. It's a toggle switch, animation, code, animation, code. And we're going to go over to the animation side to begin with. For today, I'm going to ask you to collect things that are out of what's called the Sprite Library. It's possible to make your own. It's also possible to get things off of the internet and use those, but for today, don't do that. Don't make your own. Don't get things off the internet. We'll do that later. Right now, I just want you to work on pulling things out of the library and making a little scene out of it. All right, so there's a button here that says New Animation. I'm going to go ahead and click it. I get this screen that pops up with all of these categories. These are categories. For example, if I go to animals, you'll see that there are a lot of animals. And you see what they look like. Kind of you wouldn't necessarily know this, but this has all been updated here recently. There's a whole bunch of new options that weren't here last semester when I taught this class. So that's kind of fun. All right, so part of what you kind of got to do today is get in there and look around, browse around, and see what's in there and what you think you want and what you think you like. One area is called backgrounds, so I'm going to go to backgrounds, and then I'm going to use this background right here. It looks kind of like the surface of Mars or something. There's several backgrounds in there that you could take a look at. So when I click it, it appears over here on the left-hand side in this little set of thumbnails, and you also see a bigger copy of it as well. Right here it says background landscape, and I think there's also a number on that, and you can change this if you want. It doesn't make a big difference. I might just come over here and click in that slot right there and just call this Mars. Now you'll find once you see how this works, I could go add another new animation and collect a whole bunch of things before I go back over to the code side, or I could go back over to the code side and get that background put into place where I want it. So it doesn't really matter which way you work. You could collect a whole bunch. You're going to need at least 5. So you could collect a bunch of these things out of the library first. In fact, I think maybe I'll do it that way. I'll collect them first, then I'll go back over to the code side of it, and I'll go to work on that part of it. Let's go back to animation. I'll click New Animation, and another thing that I want here is, and you can search. Up here there's a search bar, and so I want the astronaut, and it's this guy right here that I want. And so I just typed AST, and I figured he would be in there, and so here he is, right? So I want that. And again, over here, it comes up with this thing says Astronaut 1, and I could change that if I want to, or I could leave it as it is if I want to. It really doesn't matter either way. I'm going to click New Animation again. There's a collection of robots, and I want this robot right here, so I'm going to get this one. And again, this says robot number 8, and then it puts an instance number, like, so this is the first instance of that robot. And again, I could change that if I wanted to. I might just say robot 8. All right, cool. I'm going to click on New Animation again. I'm going to go back to robots because there's another one that I want. It is this little one that looks like a drone, has a blade on it. So I'm going to click that, and that's robot 26. So I'll just take off that one just because I feel like it. All right, so there it is. And now I want a couple of spaceships. Actually, I'm going to be using 6 sprites in mine. So I'm going to click New Animation, and I'm going to Vehicles. And inside the vehicles, there's a whole bunch of there's some cars and motors. You see them, right? Cars and motorcycles and spaceships and whatnot. All right, so I think I'll use this one, and that's called Ship 01, and I'm okay with that. That's not the same one you saw in my demo a minute ago, but I like that one. It's okay. And one more spaceship. So I'm going to click New Animation, and I'm going to go get another spaceship that I want. I think the other one that I'm going to use, it'd be kind of fun to use that pirate ship, right? Wouldn't that be? I'm going to use this UFO. Let's use that. Boom. And that'll just be UFO 02. All right, cool. So I have collected, these are the things I'm going to build a little scene out of, right? I've got them all collected. Here we go. So now what I'll do is go back over to the code side, and let's get to work on, all right, so how do you make those appear on the game screen, and how do you work with them once they're there? You have to think about things like how big they are and where they are, and you might have to rotate one, maybe. I don't know if you'll want to rotate one or not. So let's go to work. Let's find out. All right, well, most of what we're going to do is going to be found in the Sprites drawer. So I'm going to go to Sprites in the toolbox. And there are a lot of commands in here, and we're going to use a whole bunch of these things as we go through the lessons. For every one of these sprites, I have to start with these two things right here. This var sprite equals and create sprite. That's called creating the sprite. And then I also have to set the animation. All right, now here in this first block, you're going to have to name each object. Give it a name. It has to have a unique name. So what I'm going to start with is my background. So I'm going to just say BG for background. This refers to an X and a Y value of where it's going to be placed to begin with. So I'm just going to leave that as 200, 200 for the time being. This will have to, excuse me, this will have to match this. So this is going to have to be BG. And then here, when I drop this menu, it has all of those things. You should recognize those. And those are all the things that were over there on the animation tab that I picked out. So I want this to be my background, and that's just going to be the one called Mars. Now, to make, if I run this right now, nothing happens at all. So to make the sprites actually appear, here's one other thing you have to do. There's a command that's in the section called World right here. It's the first one on the left side, and it's yellow. And it's this one right here. We need this command. We only need it once. I'm going to bring it over and drop it here. And we're going to keep that draw sprites command at the bottom of the list. It's going to need to be at the bottom. All right, now if I run it, there, I have a background. Cool. All right. Well, so let's proceed on. Let's go on and put my next object onto my background. I'll reset that. I'm going to go back to sprites. And again, for every one of these sprites, I have to bring over this var sprite equals create sprite. I have to do that, and I also have to do this. The next one that I'm going to put in is going to be my astronaut. So I'm going to give it a unique name, Astro, and I'll also match that down here right now. All right, so you make that match. To begin with, it's going to place it at 200, 200. I'll show you an option that you have here in just a second about what you do with that. Now I'm going to drop this menu down, and this is going to be my astronaut. Now the draw sprites command needs to stay at the bottom. So you may have to, be careful about where you drag and drop things in. I'm going to go ahead and run that. And so now I have my astronaut on the screen. But he's way too big, and he's not exactly in the place where I want him either. So here's a couple of things that we can do. There's a block here in the sprites drawer called Sprite.Scale. And I'm going to bring it over and drop it right there. Now the name has to match. I want to scale the astronaut, so I have to put Astro in there. Here's how scaling works. If I put the number 1 and I reset and I run this, there was no change. The number 1 just indicates that's his actual size. So the number 1 didn't do anything. If I were to put the number 2 and I reset and I run, he just became twice his original size. So that's how that scales. And I don't want him to be that big, right? He's twice his regular size now. That's what that number 2. He's been multiplied by a factor of 2. So what I'm going to have to do is use a decimal, because I want him to be smaller than his actual size, and his actual size is 1, so I'm going to have to use a decimal. Code.org likes leading zeros. So what I mean is this: if you type like 0.5, yeah, it'll work, but you're going to get a little yellow triangle over here. It's kind of Code.org's way of yelling at you about, I'd really rather you put a 0 in front of that. All right, Code.org, I will. So if I say scale 0.5, then the astronaut should be half of its normal size. That's getting better. Actually, I still want it a little bit smaller. So I'm going to take the astronaut down to a 0.3. 3/10 of its normal size, and I like that pretty well. Now, I mean, on Mars or whatever, you might be able to float around and bounce a little bit, but the next thing to think about is where do I want him? And actually, I want him standing, looking like he's standing on the surface. There are 2 ways I could tackle this. This 200, 200 right here on the astronaut is referring to the X and the Y of the astronaut. So I could plug it in right there. That would be totally fine. It would work. Another way I could do it, if I wanted to, and this is really up to you, do it the way it makes sense to you. There's a couple of commands over here that say sprite.x and sprite.y. I could, if I wanted to, I could drag over a sprite.x and a sprite.y, and this would have to be Astro, and I'm going to go ahead and make this say Astro, and then I could put in the x and the y value that I feel like I want in this case. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set an x value of 75 and a y value of 325. And again, if you want to, you can hit show grid, and that might help you with placing things on the screen. When I reset and run that, now the astronaut is in a different location. And again, I could have plugged the 75 and the 325 in right up here when I first created the sprite. I could have done that. So either way works. All right. My astronaut is on. Yay. Well, let's go to work on one of the robots now. So again, every time I'm going to do one of these, I have to bring over that var sprite equals create sprite, and I have to bring over this set animation. All right. And I'm just going to call this bot1. And here I'll click and say bot1. And I've already kind of figured out some X and Y's here for him. So I'm going to go 200. Sorry. Let me got to get in there. I'm going 201. I'm sorry, 350. 200 and 350, and he's going to be robot. That's going to be robot number 8. Pow. Let's run that. Now it's pretty good, except I've got that whole problem of that bot being too big. He's too big, so I'm going to have to scale him. So I'll bring over a sprite.scale. And I'll go bot1, and I'm going to scale that one to a factor of 0.2, 2/10 of his normal size. There we go. So I scaled him down some, and now he is standing at a location that I like, and that's because I plugged in the 200, 350 right there. And I scaled him down some so he's not as big as he was, and I'm pretty happy with what I got. All right. Let's, I'm going to forge ahead and put maybe one of the spaceships in the sky, but then I might start to kind of wrap it up, because you're beginning to see the pattern that is involved in doing this, right? You'll have to put a little more work into your version of it, but let's take a look. What else do I have to put in, right? I got a couple of spaceships. I'm going to put this first spaceship in. All right, so let's do that. I'm going to bring over a var. Every time that you're going to put one of those on, you have to, this is called, it's kind of defining creating the sprite, defining the sprite. All right, so I'm just going to call this ship1, and I'll bring over that set animation These things work in pairs. You have to have, you know, for ship 1, I have to have one of those, and I have to have one of those. Ship 1 is going to be ship 1 here. That's the way. It's the purple one. Well, let me make sure that I'm getting the one that I want. Yes, I am. I want the purple one. All right. Now, again, I could go ahead and run it once. Let's see what happens. Okay, so the purple ship is there, but here's a couple of things. It's not where I want it, and it's too big. So I got to tackle all those things. Well, okay, the two big things, not hard. I'm going to bring over a Sprite.Scale, and I'll say this is going to be ship 1. And for the scale, I'm going to go 0. I think I'll do a 0.3, 0.3. And if I reset and run it, okay, I'm pretty happy with that size. All right, so let's consider X and Y now, and I might show the grid here for a minute. I think I'm going to stick it up, and its anchor point is near its center. So I'm going to put it I'm going to try it over about 300 and down 50. So I'll just plug them in here, right? Again, I could, if I wanted to, bring over one of those Sprite.X and Sprite.Y. That's another way to do it. But I'm just going to say, let's try 300 and down 50. Whoops, not 500. All right, let's reset and run that. All right, so now that spaceship is up flying through the sky. Here's one more thing I want to show you, though. What if I'm thinking, gosh, I really kind of wish that spaceship was pointed the other way. Just, maybe you might run into that situation where you've got something in your scene, but it's not like oriented the way you want. I want it pointing the other way. All right. Well, there's a block right here that says Sprite.Rotation. So I'm going to bring it over, and I'm going to, you got to stay consistent with your variables here. This is ship 1, ship 1, ship 1, ship 1. Now let's think this through. If you look at the purple ship, it's pointing to our right, and think about what I want to do. I want to point it the other way. Well, let's think degrees in a circle. How many degrees do I need to turn it? 180. I want it to go just the opposite direction. Now, if you ever do a rotation and it just doesn't work out, then try a different number, right? So I'm going to just set ship 1 rotation to 180. I want to rotate it 180 degrees. I'll reset and I'll run. Look at my purple spaceship up there. He's now flying in the other direction. Now, really, if I'm counting the background, which, by the way, the background would count, it's a sprite, I've already done 4, and the requirement is what? The requirement is 5. You have to have 5. And I've done 4. So, all I would have to do to finish this off is do one more of these. But I don't think I'm going to do that in this movie. Hopefully you're seeing the pattern. For every one of these sprites, you have to bring over the var create sprite, and you also have to bring over the set animation and get it set to the thing that you picked. And then depending on what you're working with, you might have to scale it. You probably are going to have to work with an X and a Y, which you could either do by bringing over Sprite.X and Sprite.Y, or you could just plug in X and Y values right here on the create sprite thing. In this case, you could do that. Either way would work. You can kind of do that either way you would like. Keep the draw sprites command at the bottom. That has to be there, but it needs to be at the bottom. It needs to be the last thing that happens. So you got all of this stuff setting up the little objects and characters, and then it draws them at the very end. All right, like I say, to finish it, I'd have to do one more, but I'm not going to do that. When I get all done, I could rename it Space, and I could do the share and turn it in, and there you go. That is your mission of the day.